Hey y'all, welcome back to the Lavender Book Company. I'm Kat, and I'm going after Cocomelon today. Okay, no, but for real, there is a connection here, and I will make it, I promise. Okay, because some people who follow me already or subscribe to me know that I talk about children's books. I make children's books, so why on earth am I talking about Cocomelon and just entertainment for kids today as a whole? And that's because they're all intertwined, and I will explain. But first, let's talk about TV shows. And also, if you're not subscribed, go ahead and subscribe. I'm just a self-published children's book author, and I'm bringing you along my journey. All right, we talk about children's books, making children's books, my small business, and all that kind of fun jazz. So go ahead and subscribe. But let's go ahead and just start ripping into Cocomelon. Where are my millennials at? Where are my millennials? So for you guys, you guys will know what I mean when I'm talking about this. But I remember the shows that I grew up on, and I see the shows now that are offered for kids, and I am floored, and not in a good way, okay? I grew up on shows like Wallace and Gromit, which I absolutely love that show still to this day, and I do love Shaun the Sheep. I think that show is so cute. But I grew up on like Wallace and Gromit, The Brave Little Toaster. My husband, that was like a huge hit in his house growing up as a kid. The Land Before Time, Tom and Jerry, Franklin, Little Bear. All these shows I have such fond memories of, and I just loved everything about them. I loved the music, like in the opening of Little Bear. I love the illustration work in these shows. I think they're just amazing. But also the dialogue, the way it was written, it was all age appropriate, but there was nothing ever spoken down to the child. It was always speaking directly to the child, with the child, but it was never like dumbing anything down for the kids. But it was all also pertinent life lessons that kids could relate to, especially in Franklin. If you guys have ever watched that show, if you haven't watched that show and you have kids right now, you can actually watch it for free on YouTube. I pulled it up for my kids and we watch it over there. I don't think they have every episode up there, but that's definitely a show where if you're wanting to pull up a show that it talks about kind of life lessons and things to learn, especially things that are pertinent to children, that is a great show to watch. I absolutely love that show. I think the whole thing from beginning to end is so cute. And I just honestly, I can't believe how quickly children's entertainment has switched in only a couple generations. And I think one thing to also point out with these older shows is they were way less stimulating than the shows today. If you notice the difference between even like the coloring and the colors chosen and the tone and the speed of all the shots, it is vastly different than most of the shows that kids are watching today.
It's you! Ooh, you smell so good today. Tell me, did you just have some milk? 'Cause you smell so good and healthy. Or do you smell this good all the time? Well, I was just on my way into the living room to sit down on my couch and read a good book. Now let's see, which one today?
Now, of course, I feel like I always have to say this, okay? I'm not speaking in absolutes all the time when I'm talking about modern shows. I just don't want to like preface myself every time I'm talking about modern day stuff. So I'm going to just say it this one time at the beginning of the video. It's obviously not all modern shows. There are still really good modern shows today that are really cute and really wholesome, and I have no problem with, and my kids watch them and things like that. But I'm just saying where the majority is at, that's where my problem's at. So let me just say that one and done for the whole video. So first, I think the first show to bring up is Cocomelon. This is the one that has taken kids by storm, and it has most kids who do watch it in just a chokehold. There are videos of parents like testifying of this show that there are negative impacts happening on their child. They're noticing like major tantrums when they turn it off or take it away, or when they do turn the show on, the kids kind of turn into like zombies. And I think
the Tyrannosaurus, he's the best.
Mama, look, it's Cocomelon.
and I think they even have a term for it too, like when it's specifically for Cocomelon, because they've actually broken down kind of the secret sauce for Cocomelon. And it has to do with the speed between the shots, which is extremely fast. I believe it's happening like every 2 to 3 seconds on most of the time, and which is like a super fast cut change. To be doing that very often is very, very stimulating for the brain. Also, the color saturation is like cranked up to 100. So they cannot turn up the color any more than they have. And you'll notice this, that even for adults, it's very stimulating. If you actually open up a social media app on your phone, you'll notice that the buttons or any of the alerts that come through on your phone are all at the super high saturation level because it catches our eye, it keeps us entertained, we're more alert of where these buttons are. You can imagine what that's going to do for a child when the entire screen is one big just alert bomb going off in their brain. Then on top of it, the highly, highly repetitive songs.
If you are a parent and you allow your child to watch Cocomelon, must be careful. Cocomelon has been shown to release dopamine in the brain. The show's fast-paced music, rhythm, bright colors releases dopamine. Dopamine leads to addiction and withdrawals. It's the same hormone that's released when some people take drugs. The show's fast-paced sequences can lead to problems in developing motor executive functions in a child as their brains are trying to develop. Also, the fast-paced rhythm of the show has been shown to alter attention spans, meaning, just like the show, children will have lower attention spans. This show has been known to be overstimulating, as many say. In fact, American Association of Pediatrics do not recommend screen time for children under 2. You will also have a bunch of others that say Cocomelon does the opposite and helps their children. For the majority, it goes along with the former compared to the latter, due to the research that's out there.
And this is honestly why, even years ago, when my first child was really little, I was super against Cocomelon. Okay, it was like the one show that I like put my foot down on. My in-laws tried to turn it on one time, bless their hearts. Okay, I just had to put my foot down on the show. Okay, there's other shows that I've just been like, okay, whatever, sure, it's like, it's not a big deal. Like, you know, there's nothing really harmfully wrong with it. They don't watch it like a ton, it's whatever. But the Cocomelon show was, that was a no-go. That was a no-go for me. And I just really don't appreciate that type of education like for a child. I personally, and I don't want to demonize any parents, okay? Because I know the majority of us, we're just trying our best, okay? I totally get that. But just, I personally didn't appreciate that type of education for a child because I think it really talks down to a kid's intelligence. Now, just because kids are kids and they don't know everything yet doesn't mean that we should be dumbing anything down. Of course, we should simplify so a child can better understand. We're not going to use like just over the top wording. We might even use parentese, which is shown to be an excellent form of communication with younger children. But I just hate when people dumb down to kids. It really drives me crazy. Now, this is also why, so my 90s kids, where are my 90s kids? You guys will have remembered Bob the Builder, which I thought was the cutest show. I'm pretty sure it was like, they had like a British accent. And it was the cutest show. I loved like the claymation, the stop motion. I thought it was so cool. It reminded me of Wallace and Gromit. And then also Rugrats. Rugrats was a huge show. And the art illustration on that show, I remember it very differently than going back and showing it to my kids now. It's almost kind of, I still really enjoy the animation because I think it's really cool the way they did it. But especially like the first season, it's like very unsettling. I don't know if that's the right word to to use for it, but it's just very unique in its own style. But they actually came out with a modern remake of Rugrats and Bob the Builder and some other shows that like we grew up with as kids, and they like totally bombed. They totally bombed because they completely changed features of those shows that we like know and loved, but also made them so good. They really dumbed down the characters like in Bob the Builder. And for Rugrats, they totally changed the animation style on it, and people just hated it. They hated the characters. The parents could not stand the humor that was in them. The dialogue became a problem. And, you know, I think people were they just didn't appreciate that for their kids. And parents didn't want to overhear all this stuff, because if you're a parent, you know that you're going to be overhearing all of these shows. So your sanity also has to be taken into account. And that's also why I'm also very picky on my kids' shows, the ones that they do watch. So, and that's definitely where we've seen like TV shows for kids today kind of go, is like the humor has taken a huge step back. The animation style just feels like rushed, and it feels like one-dimensional and kind of flat. And it just kind of all feels like low-hanging fruit. That's honestly how it all feels between like children's books today. And we'll get into that in a second. But also like for TV shows and movies for kids, it all just feels like, let's just do what we know immediately attracts a child and keeps their attention, and just hope that it takes off. And if it doesn't, then we'll just go back to the drawing board and we'll just almost do the same thing again. And I feel like we've just lost so much character in children's entertainment as a whole. So some people may be wondering, how on earth does this correlate with children's books? This to me is all wrapped in together. And I think I could even kind of rope in children's toys as well. I mean, if we're talking about children's entertainment as a whole, I think even toys have taken a huge step down. Now, of course, like I said before, it's not all toys or not all books or whatever, but you just see, it's just, there's some toys I see and I don't get it. I don't get it. I don't get the reasoning. I don't understand. Like I don't know. I just wouldn't buy like half the stuff, or more than half the stuff that's available today. I really don't. I think it just does like the kids a disservice overall. And I think kind of the overall bigger issue here is I think it really shows the way we view our kids and their intelligence level. And this is the part that like really drives me nuts, because I view my kids as, and immediately like from day one, my kids are their own person. They're not me, they're not my husband, they're their own person. And it's my responsibility as a parent to try to set them up in the best way possible and every facet of their lives. Whether you're talking about saying please and thank you, whether you're talking about cleaning up after themselves, whether you talk about, you know, trying to learn emotional regulation, which I'm still trying to learn the same thing, but that's a totally different story. Or if you talk about just speech, like speech and vocabulary and the way I talk to my children, I really don't appreciate when people talk down to kids, and that includes in any form. So that could be actual speech to a child, or you could be talking about in movies or shows or in books. I personally believe it is very insulting to a child's intelligence. Especially as parents, we're here to be like advocates for our kids, and that includes deciding what our children are going to be consuming in all areas of their lives. Now, when it comes to children's books, I know some people are going to say, well, you know, if the choice is between screen time and reading, then of course reading is going to be the better option. So really anything in the children's book sphere is kind of green light, everything, like, because it's just overall better than screen time. Which, yes, if we boil it down between screen time, especially with all the science that has been coming out with screen time and really young kids, and then reading, of course we're going to say reading is better. But even with the reading, our kids still deserve quality. The quality should not suffer just because they're kids. And I have just noticed a massive shift in modern children's books today, where we have really moved away from like really thought out like illustrations and just illustrating children's books to really help tell a story to now I'm not demonizing digital art. I've seen amazing digital art, but I'm just saying I've seen this massive rise in really bright, overstimulating, overly simplified digital art in children's books. It just takes away from the overall storytelling experience. Now, for a child, when they can't read yet, the pictures are so important because they're helping develop and tell a story because they can't read yet. So while you're sitting there reading and they're in your lap or they're in front of you, the illustrations really help them develop the storyline in their head. And you also have to remember that this is going to help them develop their imagination as well at the same time. And now I'm a big lover of art. Okay. I've taken art for 20 plus years of my life. Okay. I absolutely love art. I adore art. And I don't underestimate the power of art. There is so much power in art that I don't think people understand if you're not around it a lot. If you are around a really good artist, it can really move you emotionally in ways that you didn't really anticipate. And it can stir up a lot of emotions that you didn't really think could happen, especially when you're looking at just a painting. I mean, there can be so much to it that there's no story, that no one's telling you anything, but you can just be so just like in awe of like what you're looking at. And you kind of just imagine the scene, you know, the entire time. My parents had this painting in their study where, and I'll see if I can find a picture of it and kind of put it up here, but it was of this woman who was going to be executed like in really old medieval England. And the whole picture around her is very dark, but she's just in this like bright white light. And, you know, she's blindfolded, and it's just it's a very powerful picture. And I bring up also the example of, if you look at someone like Monet and Rembrandt, now two very, very different artists. Now, besides their art styles, okay, I'm not talking about art styles, just even color alone, you can see how much of an impact that makes on their art because their art styles are very, very different, but they bring a totally different mood and sense to the story behind the picture and what's going on. So this is why I'm very, very passionate about illustrations, even for a children's book, because to me, a children's book is a collection of small art pieces that come together to tell a full story. That's why I think it's so sad that we are losing this just wonderful, wonderful part of a child's imagination and their experience in the storytelling process. And besides art, I also have major qualms with the modern children's books because of just kind of like the overly simplified storylines that are way below kind of an age range. And I don't appreciate the really, really repetitive nature of a lot of the writing. To me, and I've mentioned this before, like in some Instagram videos, that some repetition is good, if not necessary, depending on what kind of book you're talking about. If you're talking about a color book, before I mentioned Babar's Book of Colors. This is a perfect example of where repetition is just perfect, okay? Because you're trying to nail a connection for a child and they need that repetition to kind of really hit it home. But at the same time, repetition in the wrong place can come across as very lazy writing. Now, I try not to mention a lot of very specific books nowadays just because that's not my angle. Okay, that's not my goal. That's not my goal to like knock other children's book authors and things like that. Now, but the one book that I want to bring up just as an example so people know what I'm talking about, so I'm not being like super ambiguous here, is Dragons Love Tacos. If you open up that book and read it, it is very, very repetitive. It says tacos like a lot, like a lot. Now, I think the idea is really cute. I'm not saying the concept of dragons loving tacos is problematic. That's not problematic. I think it's clever. I think it's cute, but I don't think the book was written as well as it could have been. That's what I'm saying. Now, I'm not saying that you can't have silly books in your at-home library. Okay, we have silly books. We have books that I somewhat regret getting, but my kids enjoy them. And we don't have just tons of them, so I really don't mind it. I don't mind having the handful of books that we have like that because my kids enjoy them. But the problem comes in for me, and what I feel like a lot of parents are having nowadays is it's becoming the norm when it should be the exception. It should not be every single book we come across is a silly book with silly characters, with a silly storyline and more potty humor and books like that. And that is the problem that parents are having nowadays is we've noticed it's not happening as quickly in like the children's literature portion of the entertainment. It's happening a lot faster in like TV shows just because of the way they get consumed a lot faster. And, children are just kind of attached onto these shows. But you do see this happening in children's book literature is you are seeing this shift because people realize and publishers realize that that's what sells. Like that's what catches a kid's attention is the silly storylines with silly characters, with potty humor and things like that. And of course, having a few of those books or having a handful of those books in your home will not do your child irreparable damage. Okay? They just won't. I have always spoken from a point of moderation on my accounts, which I know is not the clickbaity thing. I know that that's not the thing that will make people mad and rage bait people into commenting and things like that. But that's genuinely what I believe. I genuinely believe in moderation in everything. And that includes books. Just like I enjoy a reality TV show, just like the next person, that cannot be all that I consume.
Hello, everyone. This is the editing floor, aka me. I forgot to mention that I wanted to include this really cool comment that someone had made over on my Instagram. She's actually a speech therapist for kids, and she knows that I talk about this a lot on my Instagram, kind of the necessary, like the importance of having good books for kids and how it ties into speech. So I'm going to put up her comment here. You can pause to read it. It was very interesting. And I was very thankful for her to take the time out to kind of give me her professional feedback, because while I say it all the time and I feel like it's important from like a mother's perspective, I think it's really interesting to take into account what professionals are seeing and what, their 2 cents as well. So go ahead and pause it. It was super interesting. And let's go ahead and get back into it.
So some people may be wondering, okay, well, what can we do at this point? What's our goal here? What can we do? What's in our power? And let me just tell you, you are the consumer. And like the name says, you choose what to consume. And that's who we are as human beings. We are the product of what we consume in all facets of our lives, whether you're talking physically, emotionally, spiritually, mentally. We are what we consume on these different levels. And that's just the name of the game, because we're humans. We are typically the product of our environment, and our children are not an exception to this rule. Most of a child's development in the brain happens before the age of 5, which is wild. That is wild to think that what's happening within the first 5 years, five, that is not a long time. That is not a long time. If you have kids, you know how fast time can go. I have a 5.5-year-old. Most of her brain development has happened, okay? Not saying that she's still not learning things now, and not saying kids kind of progressively learn over time, but the bulk learning has happened by age 5, which is insane. That is not a lot of time. And so you have to realize that kids in that little window of time, there is so much going on developmentally. And so this is the time, if any, to be really, really picky on what your child is consuming. And I just firmly believe that while, of course, we want to be entertained and we want to enjoy our lives as well, I think it's also very important to also be edified. And our kids are the same way. Like our kids are the same way, whether they can verbalize that or not. I think we always kind of walk away. If we walk away from something where we've learned something really interesting, or, we've watched something that has really moved us, like we feel edified in some way. And as humans, I think that really drives us, and our kids are the same way. And of course, it's all on their own level and spectrum, right? With them being kids. But our kids are no different. Like I don't separate myself from my children. I view them the same way I view any other adult, and I do whatever for myself as I do with my kids. I don't treat my kids any different to things I would do to myself. And that's like where my passion comes in with children's books and with all this kind of stuff kind of geared towards kids nowadays. And this is honestly something that kind of kickstarted me making children's books because I just kind of noticed what was happening from a mom's perspective. You know, I had my first kid and I was slowly building up my at-home library, and I just became really frustrated. I became really frustrated what was being offered, and I wanted better. Like I wanted better for my kids, and that was the initial igniter for everything. So that's where my passion comes in. I look at it not just as a children's book author, but as a mom. Like, and so I know when I speak to other parents who have the same frustrations, I know exactly what it feels like because I was there. I was there walking through thrift stores and libraries and bookshops for a while, like a long time. Like I would spend a long time going like title by title, reading through books, like skimming through them, reading them cover to cover, and I was just feeling so frustrated. And so that's where kind of everything kickstarted for me, and why I just really have a huge love and adoration for the classics. But as much as I love them, I think that they can be very wordy, or they could kind of feel a little bit out of touch to the modern kid, you know, and to the way that they speak and are more modern day vernacular and things like that. And so that's where me as a children's book author and my publishing company comes into play. I wanted to bring books that felt classic. So they had that really cozy, just kind of warm character and storyline, but they're all written and illustrated and designed with our kids like on the forefront. And that is how all this was born, how all this was started. So thank you for joining me on this whole journey of talking about children's entertainment as a whole. And so just let me know all your thoughts down below, because I would just love to like just chit chat about everything. So thank you guys so much. My next video will be going over formatting of my second children's book. So a lot of people have been waiting for that. My life is just crazy right now. I can't even begin to explain. Okay. So, but the next video will be on formatting. So fear not. And thank you for joining me, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye.